presentation of any of the participants. Jeremy, if you can possibly or check that. It's not that they can't talk, they can't hear all of them.
It is now unmuted and we can hear you, Mike. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Roll call.
Baker,
Here.
Broadway,
Here.
Burris,
Here.
Dowden Cavillo,
Present.
Holmes,
Here.
Howdeshell,
Here.
Jones,
Here.
Wilkins,
Here.
all present.
Perfect. Thank you. AB 361, Director Lucan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We have before you the request for the next 30 days to extend by adopting resolution 22-19 so that we can hold this meeting in remote teleconference format. This is an item that we've done the past few months when this was brought back to the board at the last meeting. The board expressed concern that we continue this. However, in light of recent increases in COVID-19 cases in the county and the region and the state, we left this on here so that the board could go in either direction if they so choose. This would not affect this meeting. It would be for the next meeting. So you have the option to either adopt the resolution. It clears us for the next 30 days, or if you want to not do that, that would then mean we would go back to the normal format of either in person or notification of where the particular board member was if they were doing remote teleconferencing. We will continue to do our public participation though in the hybrid format as we have seen that it increases public participation.
Perfect. Thank you. Is there any questions, comments, statements from?
I'll
No.
make a motion that we approve it.
Second.
Perfect.
We want to ask the.
Is there any public comment on this item? I can look up here, I guess. I don't see any. Okay. So do a roll. Do a vote.
Baker,
Aye.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Dowden Cavillo,
Aye.
Holmes,
Aye.
Howdeshell,
Aye.
Jones,
Yes.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on, approval of action minutes. We have it.
Mr. Chair, if there's no questions, I'll move approval of the April 27th minutes.
I'll second. Dowden Calvio second.
Thank you.
Baker,
Aye.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Dowden Cavillo,
Aye.
Holmes,
Aye.
Howdeshell,
Aye.
Jones, Wilkins.
Yes.
Passes.
Perfect, thank you. Agenda review, are there any items that we need?
No, there are no items that need to be
Perfect.
modified from staff's recommendation.
Awesome, thank you. Public comment, this is time for the public to speak on anything not on our agenda tonight or today. None? Perfect. Moving on to item G, consent calendar for Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. Does anybody need to pull anything?
I'd move approval of the consent calendar.
Perfect. We have
Second.
second.
Right up to
Is there anyone in the public that wishes to pull any items? Perfect. Seeing none, we have a motion in a second.
Baker,
Aye.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Dowden Cavillo,
Aye.
Holmes, Howdeshell,
Aye.
Jones, Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Consent calendar for Airport Land Use Commission. Anybody have anything for that one? Anyone in the public?
Mr. Chairman, Dowden Calvio moves approval of consent item H.
Thank you.
I'll second. I'll defer to Supervisor Jones.
Baker,
Aye.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Dowden Cavio,
Aye.
Holmes,
Yes.
Haudashelt,
Aye.
Jones,
Yes.
Wilkins. Motion passes.
Thank you. Consent calendar for Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. Anyone from the commission or public wish to pull anything? Nobody? Perfect.
Being none, I'll move approval.
Approval in a second.
Baker,
Aye.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Dowden Cavio,
Aye.
Holmes,
Yes.
Haudashelt,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We are flying through this one. This one is
They're all
awesome.
consent.
All right, moving on to item J. State Route 49 Sidewalk Gap Closure Project. Director Lucan.
Yes, I'll be presenting this with Rick being out today. The item you have before you is a request on the Highway 49 sidewalk gap closure project to essentially adopt an MOU with Sparta, because with this project, due to the nature of the agency, PCTPA is not allowed to hold or purchase right of way for a project. And because this project requires right of way in a number of locations, we are able to defer and to utilize Sparta, who is a JPA empowered with those particular powers to do that. And so the requested action today is that you execute an MOU between Sparta and PCTPA to do that acquisition of right of way for the sidewalk gap closure project. And then adopt findings that this is exempt from environmental review. We could go to the next slide. A little bit about, again, on the background is this project essentially is to move forward with after the completion of the Highway 49 rehabilitation project implemented by Caltrans, and essentially provide a path of sidewalks and bicycle lanes between Dry Creek and Interstate 80 along Highway 49 to basically close gaps, i.e. the closure of gap project. There is about 3/4 of that project is in the unincorporated county, and about 1/4 of it is in the city of Auburn. Next slide. PCTPA is the authorized agency with Caltrans and with the grant that we got through the ATP program to implement the project. And so PCTPA needs to be the agency implementing it and is the lead agency for the project. But as I mentioned before, PCTPA does not have those powers as it was set up by the state of California to work and deal with right of way. So we need to seek Sparta's assistance. Now, Sparta is an agency that is only active in the south part of the county, but because it includes one of our member agencies, as long as there's no cost to Sparta for this effort, essentially PCTPA bears those costs, then Sparta can be utilized as a fiduciary, if you will, for acquiring that and holding that right away. Next slide. So this MOU would be just so that the two agencies could work together, and the legal language to allow this to be executed, because one agency is the lead agency on the grant and implementing the project, and the other agency is simply holding the right of way. And I would mention that it's only holding that right of way until because it's a state highway, until such time that right of way needs to move over to Caltrans in a permanent basis. So we're not adding the project to the Sparta list of projects, and it won't receive any Sparta funding. Next slide. There are approximately 48 affected parcels in this endeavor. 5 of those are partial acquisitions, so not very many, and 43 of those are temporary construction easements. So because of the large amount of parcels and the tight schedule, this MOU also delegates to the executive director the authority to implement that project. Next slide. Of course, this requires CEQA conformance, and so we have staff is recommending the same findings as with Caltrans with a notice of exemption. Next slide. Again, these findings to make this project categorically exempt are essentially because this is a not a VMT increasing project. This is a project that simply fills in gaps for along the existing corridor for sidewalks to promote alternative modes of transportation. Next slide. So staff would recommend that we adopt these resolutions or adopt the MOU as presented in the staff report and adopt the findings for CEQA. So,
Mr. Chair, I have to step out because I own property on Highway 49, and so I don't want to be here when the board discusses this item. So
Perfect.
I'm not
Thank
going
you.
away. I'll be right outside the door.
Yeah.
so that concludes staff's report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Perfect. Thank you.
I should mention there will be a corresponding item on the Sparta agenda as well. The other side of this to adopt the MOU on that side today.
Absolutely. Thank you. Board members, any?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I have just kind of a procedural question. I understand that we don't have that right-of-way authority. It's interesting, I guess, when we were established. Is there any value in seeking that at some time? And is that a legislative fix in order to grant us that authority?
It would be a legislative fix, and we staff investigated that. However, these days when you seek a legislative fix, they sometimes like to add on other things that we may not like. So we felt for this purpose, it would be just as easy for Sparta to do that. Sparta falls under the same insurance policy as the rest of the agency. And so it's relatively easy, and it's really a temporary hold until Caltrans would take over those parcels anyway.
Sure, and I wasn't meaning that we would hold up this project in lieu of, of that particular research. I just was thinking going forward if there was any value, but it sounds, I do recognize if it's a legislative fix, you can open up a Pandora's box. So, but just wanted to throw that out there. I don't know how often we need that authority and we have to enter into an MOU with Sparta or another, member agency, but maybe at another time. So, okay, that was really the only question I had. So thank you.
If the opportunity presents itself with some other things that we may be doing, then that might be an endeavor that we could take on. But staff would not recommend just a single purpose legislative amendment at this time.
Sure.
So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, Brian. So Mike, 43 parcels or 43?
Approximately, yes.
Yeah. And do you imagine, so the question is, how long is Sparta going to be holding this until Caltrans? And, it's hard to predict.
Probably a few years. And it's 5 parcels that we need for these little slivers of mostly parcels. Okay. The remainder of those are temporary construction easements. So those aren't really even utilized until the construction starts.
Well, my larger question, having with the auxiliary lane and trying to track down the estate on the right of way and everything like that. I was just curious how long we might be holding these.
Probably a few years. And we do have Monument, who's a company working on behalf of PCTPA right now. That's essentially working on all the utility relocation and right of way aspects of this project. So they're actively working on it right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Trinity? No. All right. Anybody from the public? Okay. Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman, Dowden Calviel will move that we adopt resolution 2221 to direct the chair to execute an MOU between Sparta and PCTPA authorizing Sparta to acquire the right of way for the State Route 49 sidewalk gap closure project and requiring the PCTPA reimburse Sparta for all Sparta costs. Do you want us to do those in two motions, the two requests, or do you want it to be in one?
It can be as presented in the report, it's fine.
Okay, well, because I read the second one, so, and I would also, in addition, that we adopt resolution 2222, finding that the SR 49 sidewalk gap closure project exempt from CEQA and direct the filing of a notice of exemption.
Thank you.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Baker,
Aye.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
yes,
Dalvin Cavio,
Aye.
Haudashelt,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Perfect, thank you. Moving on to item K, final fiscal year 22-23 overall work program and budget. Looks like Jody and Director Lucan.
Good morning, Chair and members of the board. Being brought to you is the final fiscal year 22-23 OWP and budget. It has been adjusted slightly from the draft that was presented to you in March. And I'm going to go over the highlights of those changes. First, we have adjusted the salary schedule down to a 3% COLA.
Mr. Chair, should we,
Oh, I'll
Mr.
go.
Holmes,
Oh,
he went into that soundproof box.
should we note in the minutes that
Holmes had to recuse.
it's in there.
on the vote?
You're welcome.
Moving on without him. Sorry.
You were in soundproof.
Yeah.
Respect your elders, young man.
Okay, so some of the highlights of the changes that have been made in this final budget from the draft that was presented to you March. We did adjust the salary schedule, cost of living adjustment to 3%. The draft had 7.4, and that was based on our salary schedule in cost of living adjustments in our personnel policy says it's going to be at the CPIU, which is now close to 9%, and it would not be fiscally prudent for us to continue on with that. So next month, we'll be presenting to you some language change in our personnel policy. The second is adjustments that were made to incorporate changes based on Caltrans local assistance response to the draft. There was some language changes to outline consultant activities and previous work that was completed for certain projects, and a shift of 94,000 from CMAQ funds to LTF funds for freeway service patrol, as the time limit to use those funds has been met. And then some direct project costs have been adjusted based on the Second Amendment of this year's OWP, which moved some project expenditures into the 22-23 fiscal year, mostly Highway 49 project and some transit planning and funding strategy carryover was also added. And unless there's anything else.
Yeah, just a couple items to highlight. Jody mentioned, I think, both these. One is with the freeway service patrol. Caltrans had pointed out that we can no longer use CMAQ funds for that, and that's because there's a approximately five-year cap on utilizing CMAQ funds. And so we worked really closely with the city of Roseville to do a fund swap, which you approved, to essentially move some RSTBG funding to fund that project. Now, the reason I mentioned that is it will be a challenge for us as we move forward beyond next fiscal year. We're going to have to find a source of funding to essentially fill that hole, if you will, that CMAQ funding was used for a significant amount of years. If we can't, we will have to, of course, recommend a reduction in services. So that's a significant highlight I wanted to point out in this OWP, but a thing that will affect us moving forward beyond next fiscal year. And then the last thing is I just wanted to connect the dots between amendment number 2 of the 21-22 budget and this budget. It was unusual in that amendment number 2 where we had carryover funds, or we had a surplus, if you will. And that's, again, to repeat myself from last meeting, that is so that we had funds that the jurisdiction specifically contributed for the funding strategy. And then we moved those over into this next year's work budget. What that did is that essentially reduced the request that we have had for a number of years from about $400,000 per year in additional expenses down to $100,000 because we were able to carry over these dollars. And the reason we were able to carry over these dollars is because we weren't able to execute on some of our funding strategy things due to the variance and other factors. So essentially we're saving that amount of money, but then next fiscal year, our request again to get us back to a 2024 potential measure will probably go back up to that $400,000 request in LTF from our jurisdictions, as they have contributed in prior years. So with that, I'll conclude our presentation. Jody and I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Jody and Mike. Any questions of the board?
Jody, I didn't quite follow what you were saying about the COLA adjustment. So the draft budget we had seen had a higher COLA adjustment. And this one has a lower one.
Correct.
And I guess I'm probably new enough to the board. Do we have labor agreements with the staff, or is it just kind of board action?
No, we don't have any labor agreements with staff, but one of the things we try to do with our OWP budget is match our member agencies' policies and procedures. And so in talking to my counterparts, the city managers and the CEOs of the other jurisdictions, we were exceeding the COLAs that they have been seeing in their budgets. And essentially what's happening is, although the CPI is on everything is going up, revenues are not coming in at that higher level. And so we're going to be bringing forward a change to our personnel policies next meeting to put a cap on that at 3%, so that if it's above 3%, then it's 3%. If it's less than 3%, it would be whatever that CPI increase would be. And that matches a lot of what our member agencies are doing. So.
Thank you.
And I appreciate that very much. So thank you for doing that. Look forward to seeing that policy come before us. So,
Thank you.
Mike, in relationship to the freeway service patrol, as we move forward, I think you're aware of my support of that. It's not just a safety issue, but it's also a traffic issue, as well as just a service issue for our residents, as well as those who visit us in South Placer. I'd certainly want us to involve Highway Patrol as we have conversations about how we move forward in any type of go forward strategy. We look at other funding. I would be concerned about a reduction simply because we have a funding concern, not because we don't have a service need. So I want to ensure we're having those conversations. We're looking at the utilization. I understand we made changes due to time, but I want to ensure that we're thoroughly reviewing it and bringing that back to the board for discussion before we reduce any type of service that's available there. And I know that we had probably 6 or 8 members of the Highway Patrol here at one time during the period that I've served on this board, strongly encouraging us to ensure we maintain this service because of the safety aspect of it. So just wanted to note that and ask that we do that. And when that's brought back to the board, we have that detail relative to, again, its utilization, the need, as well as potential funding sources. And I'm willing to help in any way I can relative to vetting out any source possible.
Yeah, we're going to have to work very closely with our member agencies to look at our funding streams to see if there's other potential. We'll also survey our sister agencies, if you will, that also implement freeway service patrol who have made this change. There have been in the kind of the same boat where they've used CMAQ for a number of years. And CMAQ, due to some changes in the FAST Act and in the new IIJA, puts a cap on how long you can use that. It treats it kind of as a pilot project, if you will, for funding. So after that period of time, they say, okay, well, it's up and going, you need to find other funding. And so we'll in the next, probably half a year to 3/4 of a year, we'll work to find another source and bring that back to the board.
Thank you. I agree with Director Broadway on that. It is a critical need. And so we do need to continue and figure out funding on that. So thank you for bringing that up. Anybody else? Perfect. And we have some public comment? Perfect.
Mr. Garabedian, you're free to talk.
Good morning, Mike Garabedian for Placer County tomorrow. I believe I'm speaking to the overall work program item. I did raise my hand on the prior item, but I was having trouble keeping up with the lickety split, asking if there was comment and then saying there is none a moment later. The item 14, communication outreach, we're very concerned about the ongoing polling, and we think that should stop, this incessant polling for Measure M2. I'd like to know how much each of those polls costs, by the way. We're opposed to the Placer Parkway, item 40, item 41, the 80-65 interchange. The Highway 65 widening, Highway 42, the auxiliary lanes, Highway 43, which should be looked upon as an embarrassment because many of you, if not all of you, are familiar with the major change in that intersection there. The tunnel and so forth was very highly engineered, and now the obsession of the District 3 director for adding lanes is making an auxiliary lane, eliminating the 2-lane off-ramp westbound to Douglas Boulevard. Of course, it widens again to 2 when you get to Douglas Boulevard, but this is a very, very short-sighted, and I think we previously supported this project because it's a safety item, but this undermines the safety aspect of it to eliminate the two off lanes from the actual highway itself. The Rego Road Baseline Road Widening Project, another proposal out to Highway 99, like we proposed Placer Parkway and that one. And the Sparta administration, the thrust of our opposition is that you're just doing the same thing over and over and over, the same projects year after year, still hoping that you will change the voters' minds who have decidedly opposed increasing a sales tax increase, even though $1 million was spent to pass it. Both the Democratic and Republican Central Committee, Republican Central Committee unanimously opposed Measure M. The Democratic Central Committee couldn't get 60% to support it. You are swimming in the past. You need to take significant steps now to relook at transportation and stop the incessant crowding that cannot possibly be addressed by the proposed increases in the 80-65 intersection or even widening 65. The estimate of 110,000 pending units that were proposed and identified by Kevin Hanley in 2016 in relation to Measure M, and the increasing number of units since then makes any hope that expanding highway capacity is going to relieve congestion just wishful thinking. And it's time.
Thank you, Mr. Garabedian.
Pardon me?
Your time's up.
Thank you for this opportunity as much as I've had.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Any additional conversation or motion?
Dowden Calvillo will move adoption of resolution 2220, authorizing the executive director to submit the attached FY 2023 overall work program and budget to Caltrans.
Rochelle seconds.
Baker,
Aye.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Dowden Cavillo,
Aye.
Holmes,
Aye.
Howard,
Aye.
Jones,
Yes.
Wilkins,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. Director Lucan.
Excuse me, good morning again. Just a few things to mention in this month's executive director report. One is related to the Lincoln Rail study a number of years ago as part of the settlement for the Sierra Club lawsuit on the widening of Highway 65. PCTPA agreed to do a Lincoln Rail study. We are now at a point of a draft study that will be conducting a virtual public meeting in the Lincoln area on that. And that study we commissioned a firm that has done many rail studies for the Sierra Club around the nation, and that they have concluded the first, if you will, draft of that. And we'll be presenting that for comment out to the public, and then bringing that back to the board in the next couple of months for consideration. And that will be the final element in the settlement of that prior lawsuit. Just a few other things to mention. Since our last meeting, we have had a number of you attended the Cap to Cap meeting in Washington, D.C. Not to go and belabor that item, but a couple of very significant items to note, and those were a couple of meetings we had with the Federal Rail Administration. We have a grant pending through the CRISI program of about $30 million. And those meetings with the upper level management staff in Washington, D.C. with FRA were pivotal, or are pivotal in the consideration of that. And we were able to meet with, again, upper level management staff at both FRA and then also at Amtrak. Amtrak is not the granting agency, but is a related agency that implements rail service, namely the staffing of our Capital Corridor program, and also the staffing and operations of the California Zephyr from Oakland to Chicago. And so both agencies were very happy with the progress that we made on that, and we had some good interaction with them. Ironically, at the same time, we here in the region, we hosted the actual administrator, or the head of the Federal Rail Administration, Amit Bose. He didn't actually come up to Roseville as originally anticipated, but was able to come and ride the Capital Corridor service from the Bay Area to Sacramento, and then meet with some staff at the Sacramento region to kind of discuss all of our efforts of the Capital Corridor, including the third track project. So very significant that we were able to have the administrator here to see our vitally important Capital Corridor service. Again, as especially as it relates to the pending grant application that we have. Last thing on rail I'd like to mention is we had our first project development team meeting last week on the to begin studying the expansion of rail from Sacramento or Roseville up to Tahoe and Reno. And so the State Division of Rail and Mass Transit as we previously reported, has included that in their work program, along with the Nevada Department of Transportation. And we have a number of agencies that are forming kind of a core PDT team. And then we have a larger, if you will, team that will be, that includes most of the agencies along the corridor, who will be meeting less frequently. And so we're just starting that study. We start with a very technical analysis called a DB or Deutsche Bahn. That's who invented the software that does that analysis. We'll be starting with that to see if there is capacity on there, and then kind of roughly how much is it going to cost. Then UP would run their software on that. And then And then we'd move into, a more advanced stage where a capital corridor itself would then take over the project and see if it's feasible. So this is the very, very beginning stages of probably a 15, 20, 25-year project. But you have to start somewhere. And it's very exciting that we have both DOTs, both state DOTs involved in this now, and a number of other agencies, and a really critical project to the region.
Mr. Lucan, before you go, you get off of the issue on rail, just really quick. Did you say that we had 30 million in grant applications and Sissy grant? Was that what you said?
For that one program, yes, we
Okay.
have a $30 million grant application. We actually have a $200 million need to complete the third track project. We have a portion of that, about half of that, from a prior grant through Prop 1B and the TERSIP program. And so we're adding to that the CRISI program. And then Caltrans also included another 30 million for the ITIP program, the Interregional Transportation Program. And then that gives us about 170 of the 200 million. And then this fall, we'll be applying for the last part of it, which is another $30 million from the Solutions for Congested Corridors program. So hopefully with this CRISI funding, and then the funding, and hopefully in the fall, we'll be able to complete the gap, if you will, in the project, and then move that project forward into final design and construction.
And the 30 million in the fall, who is that from? I'm sorry.
It's under the SB1
Oh, okay.
competitive grants program. There's
Okay.
a grant called the Solutions for Congested Corridor
Got it.
program.
Okay.
And we're developing actually a package of grants, one of which would be that third track. The other project would involve the next phase of the third track, and also would involve some work at the Sacramento Intermodal Station. And we're working with a consortium of agencies to submit that grant, that comprehensive grant package in the fall.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Last few items, real quick here is, I just want to let you know that we're making progress on the baseline Riego financing strategy. It's moving slowly ahead with a couple initiatives. One is to implement traffic signals at a few key intersections along the baseline Riego alignment. There's a 2x2x2, so 2 from the city of Roseville, 2 from the county, and 2 from the county of Placer, and 2 from the county of Sutter. That's been meeting and guiding staffs implementing this strategy, which included the interim measure of those traffic signals. And so that's moving forward into design. And then probably the more significant piece is to come up with a regional fee that could be utilized to finance the actual expansion of baseline Riego Road and maybe some surrounding roads. That's still to be seen, to expand the capacity of that system. So that's slowly moving along, but just wanted to report on the progress of that. Last couple items. One is we are yesterday closed the open period for our senior planner, engineer, or associate planner engineer recruitment. So we've got a number of applicants for that. We'll be going through that process here in the next few weeks of interviewing and hopefully replacing a key position when Aaron Hoyt left our staff to be the deputy director for Nevada County. The last thing I'd like to mention is we kind of had a significant, related to the funding strategy, a significant related item was on the SACOG board calendar at the last meeting, and that is the SACOG staff. It was an informational item, but it's where they essentially express concern over Sacramento County's Citizens Initiative, and just wanted to let the board know that we're monitoring that carefully as it could affect our efforts here in the county of Placer. The ways that it could affect that, simply, in terms of another measure in the region, that would affect it, but probably more significantly is the measure may be requesting to accelerate projects in that Sacramento County measure. That would be potentially problematic because if as we worked together on the MTP and the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Plan, which is the more short-term budgeted items, we have to work very closely in the 6-county region to essentially program those projects so that we don't exceed our air emissions target and that we don't exceed funding constraints and other factors. It's a very delicate balance that we undertake on a continual basis. And if one county were to get out ahead of the rest of the counties, that is could be problematic for Placer County. If one accelerates, you may have to see another entity decelerate. And so we don't want any unintended consequences to happen because of Sacramento County's measure. So we're monitoring this really carefully. There's a number of other policy questions that arose on land use and other things that I'd be happy to discuss with board members offline. But that is just something I want to let you know that we're going to be monitoring very closely. The SACOG representatives from Placer County often meet, and we're probably going to be having a meeting of those representatives here in the near future to kind of discuss kind of what this all means.
What is the initiative you're referring to?
So Sacramento County they took a different route than we have, and that is they went the route of a citizens initiative as opposed to a entity initiated sales tax measure for transportation on their ballot. And so under current law, that allows them to go with a 51% majority as opposed to a 2/3 majority, and it's coming from the citizens, not from an agency or staff. And so the way it's currently written, there's some concerns about how it would affect the other 5 counties in the region. So. And with that, I'll conclude my report today.
Thank you. Any other questions for Director Luken?
There are concerns with the citizens initiative, or there are concerns with the proposal itself, how it might impact the surrounding counties.
It's how it might impact the surrounding counties.
But I mean, the initiative, or I mean, the way they're going to go at it via the citizens initiative, or is it the
No.
actual language within the proposal that's of concern, or the allocation of dollars, or the?
It appears their expenditure plan, like our expenditure plan, it lists a number of projects, but it lists those happening at a faster method than is what is in the MTP. And so that is what's kind of problematic.
I see.
So
Okay.
it's not the fact that they're doing a citizens
Okay.
initiative, from my standpoint, if that's the way they want to pursue it, that's their business. But it's just how the projects are implemented. We have to be very careful and work together.
Got it. I just wanted to clarify that. So thank you.
And Mr. Luken, you said it, and I apologize if you said it and I just didn't retain it. When is that on, in 2022 or 2024?
Right now, their measure is headed for a November 2022 ballot. They still have a ways to go to get to that, but that's what they're aiming at.
Perfect. Thank you. Alrighty, any board direction to staff? Okay,
I do want to thank Mr. Luken for setting up the meetings that I participated in with the Federal Railroad Administration. It's one thing to send a letter, it's one thing to make a phone call, another thing to have a virtual meeting, but quite another thing to sit in the room with people. So Chair of the Capitol Quarter Joint Powers Authority, Don Saylor, and I participated in those meetings, so they were very productive.
perfect. Thank you. Any other direction of staff? We have some informational items, and our next meeting will be June 22nd. And we will call that adjourned.
Thank you.